Welcome to Ageless. Today we're going to talk about friendship. There are so many kinds of friendship. There are friends we have for a season in our lives that we might not see again, but they have a profound impact on us. They make us smile when we think of them. There are lifelong friends, people who knew you when. They know your history, your stories, and they love every version of you without judgment. Even if you don't see them often, your bond remains strong forever. And then there are adult friends, friends that might not have been there from the start, but once you meet them, you can't imagine your life without them. They walk you through decades of your life, sharing experiences, confidences, and the daily ups and downs of life. Today, we're going to explore the friendships between women and gay men. Why are these friendships so common, especially in midlife? And why are they so important to us as women and the men we share these friendships with? It's been the subject of books, movies, memes, even the butt of some jokes. And that's because it's a real thing. Women gravitate to these friendships. So today we're going to talk about why they're meaningful, deep, and enrich our lives. Joining me are two longtime friends, John Mitterling and Karen Livingston. Both of them also happen to be my friends. And we met in a running group years ago. And I think it's so important to point out that John, dun, da, 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 drum roll, is the first male guest on my show. John, John, you're
Yay,
a
John.
pioneer. So I'm so excited to talk to you guys about this topic. I think John and I kind of came up with it during a run. And
We
first
did.
yeah, we did. We talked
Hmm.
about like what are the reasons behind these very special friendships. So I want you to each kind of give us just a little background on who you are and what you do and kind of where you are at this point in your life. So I'll start with you, John, since you're right next to me on the screen.
Well, yeah. So I'm John Mitterling. I am a a man who is trying to make his way in the world and find peace. I found a lot more peace when I turned 54, when I finally came out after a lifetime of hiding in the closet, but having a very good life. Being married to a woman and having children, and had a good life working in nonprofits, which I still do. Um, Had a great life being very active as a marathoner, having run runs with both of you, and proud dad, proud nonprofit work or making a difference in the world. So originally from New Bern, North Carolina, so Eastern North Carolina, but I've lived in my in the Triangle most of my life. So.
Okay, thank you, John. Karen, give us a little rundown on your background.
Sure. I am a product of the great state of Florida, which, to be more specific, Daytona Beach, Florida, which is really kind of an interesting place to grow up between NASCAR and spring break and all of the craziness of Bike Week, my next favorite time of year not to be there. I went to college at University of Florida, got a degree in education, taught school for a couple of years, and decided I was probably going to starve to death. I was like, I'm single. I am not making any money. I was living on peanut butter and Kool-Aid. Um, so I started working at night on MBA and took a job in Columbus, Ohio. And I was there for about 11 years. Um, my career, which spanned about 35 years, was in corporate asset management. And I retired probably about 10 years ago. I still work a little bit part time. Most of what I do now is volunteer work, which that's been the most meaningful part of my life, obviously. I've done some mentoring with kids, especially on reading skills, and then currently work with my dog is a pet therapy team. We go to some hospitals and Special Olympics and special events around town, and she's a great therapy dog. So we have a really um, great time being able to do that. So um, that's pretty much it.
That's your story. Thank you, guys. So, the kids, when they meet, they call it a meet cute. What was the cuteness around their meeting? So tell me from both of your perspectives, like the first time you met and how did you know you were going to be friends?
Oh, I can remember that.
So my my running partner at the time, Jeffrey Kuntz, who was my dear friend, we went running at Umstead Park and ran across this really cute woman who happened to be Karen Livingston. And her running partner had bailed her that morning, and we didn't want her to run alone. So all three of us ran together. We laughed. We had lots of conversation while we were running, and that was 20 plus years ago, Karen.
Yeah,
And
21.
21, yeah. So
And
I knew I was going to be friends with Karen because she was so positive and just a fun person and loved running. And I thought, well, she's going to be a great running partner. Hopefully, hopefully
And
she,
it worked out.
yeah, it did.
well, the story is a little bit more complicated than that because I actually got on the trail a little bit before John and Jeffrey. And I'm running on, I mean, this trail is a hiking trail. It's not made for running, it is roots and rocks. And I am running, just trying to save my tail from falling. It had rained the day before, and I was just trying to stay upright. And I kept hearing these two guys behind me laughing and telling stories. And I'm like, okay, wait, this is not right. Like, how come they're not going through the craziness of trying to stay concentrated on this trail? And so at some point, I hit a root and I went down. And I'm standing up and I'm
Oh,
dusting myself off, right? And then here comes these two loud guys that were behind me. They're like, "Hey, girl, you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And they're like, "Come with us. We'll bust our tails together." So we finished the trail run, and at the end, it just went so fast because John talked the whole time. And at some point, I think he might have
really?
even
I
been,
can't imagine
I
I
that.
know,
know. I don't
right?
remember that part either.
It was crazy. And he's telling jokes and then he starts like singing show tunes. And I'm like, okay, this guy's cool. I need this running partner. Like, this will be like the best running partner ever. And so at the end of the run, we were like, well, what do you guys say next week? Same time, same place. And then I think John came back and he had a couple other friends and then a couple more friends. And then next thing we knew, there were like 20 of us that were all running together for, we were all training for different marathons and we just kept going. It was
What
cool.
year was that, Karen, do you think?
It was in 2004. I
Okay.
was training for my iron. I was doing an Ironman triathlon. So I was
Wow.
training for that. So yeah, I remember that date.
And the funny thing about running, and I've run with you guys, I have a couple other friends that I run with, you talk a lot, right? I mean, you really get to know somebody when you're doing 5, 10 miles, 15 miles, whatever you're doing.
Oh
And
yeah.
John, you mentioned at the top that you were not out until about 6.5 years ago. Is that
Right.
right?
Right.
So here you are, you have this really close friend, and there's something very pivotal in your life that you're not sharing with her. What was that like? I mean, did you want to share it? How did you eventually do that?
Yeah, it was very difficult, and I'm glad that Karen reminded me of all the details of that story. And I guess she probably knew at the time that I was gay because I was singing show tunes on
I
my
Not to be
run.
suspect.
stereotypical, but that might have been a clue.
Right. It
A
could have
clue.
been a clue.
Yeah,
I mean,
So
could have been.
could have been.
yeah, so it was difficult, and I didn't think of it as something I could ever change, but it was a secret that I held inside. And I was a father. In my adult life, I wanted to come out in college, but it was in the middle of the AIDS crisis, and that was very scary for me. And I also was from Eastern North Carolina and thought I would not be accepted in the business community. So I thought, okay, I can't ever come out. And I did want to become a father. And so, I I fell in love with someone that I had grown up with, and I'm so glad that I became a father and had that experience as a married man. But every every day I was I just was struggling with it. And so we were married for 20 years. I actually got married again after that because I was very concerned about having to come out. And my therapist recommended that I'd come out, and I just didn't. So I was married for almost 7 years. And at the sixth year, I started to get very, very sick. I went to every doctor possible. And I mean, I was very, very sick for more than a year. And the same week, my minister, doctor, and therapist all said, John, you're killing yourself. You need to come out. You are dying. You are literally dying. And I thought, how can I do this? And finally, I mustered up the courage to say, I've got to do it. So I did get divorced and I came out, and everything that was wrong with me went away. Everything. And
Karen,
Karen saw me through every
All of
step
it.
of that,
that's what I was
every
going to
step.
ask. I mean, because, we have friends that are just there for us in these really important times in life. Karen, how did you help John? I mean, what did he tell you, and how did you support him?
It was a really hard time for John. I mean, I knew John, while he was raising his children and married and, happily married, a great dad and a great husband. Um, I always felt like there was something missing from John's life. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I really wasn't sure what it was. But when he started to become, I mean, really physically sick, he was going to the emergency room, and we would text or call and like, you want to run? He's like, I'm in the emergency room. Like, no, we didn't run together for a while because you were so, you know, just feeling down.
Yeah.
Um, and we talked a lot about it. And I think the perspective that I had was exactly what John just said. It was time for him to make a decision to come out.
How did that support help you, John, navigate this difficult time?
Yeah, I think Karen was probably the first person that I knew I could come out to, and that I knew was going to be a great support to me, because Karen is the least judgmental person in the United States or the world. And,
Wow.
so
Who knew?
yeah. And I mean, it didn't matter what problem I had, and I had a lot of problems. I came to Karen and she didn't judge. She was there to support me, never telling me what to do, but always asking those questions like a counselor would say, is like, so how does that work for you? How are you doing? How kind of like a Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? But she did it in a way that was just unique. And she was the first person, I think, who helped me understand that I could come out, and we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about my coming out. We didn't talk about my orientation. She was just focused on my happiness, and the void that I had in my life. And I knew it, but I couldn't name it. And yeah, when I finally did come out to Karen, she, along with some other friends, were like, well, I'm glad you finally figured it out. And I said, you know, uh,
I think my exact words were, "What took you so long?"
right.
I think
Yeah.
Karen actually said, John has some news. And then I ran into you at Panera and you said, I have some news. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I know what it is. So, um,
Yeah.
well, anyway, on that note, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. Welcome back. So, I did a little research for the show, and there's actually a lot written about this topic. So, there's been some scientific studies, believe it or not. But here's an example of an article that I found. This was in the Times of India in August of 2021. And here's a quote: Admit it or not, but whenever a man and a woman interact, there is a frisson of awareness between them, an ambiguous, awkward sexual tension that underlies such interactions. Both are either trying to convey a sexual interest or trying to gauge if the other side has any, or even trying hard to establish that there is none. Truly comfortably platonic friendships that are without undercurrents are rare between two sexes. Not impossible, but rare. Now, she goes on to say there's a bunch of things that set relationships between women, straight women, and gay men apart. And part of it is a big trust bond. Women feel safe because they're not being wooed in general, not always, but they're not competing for the same men. Gay men are often more comfortable than straight men in sharing a more feminine side. This is a stereotype, obviously, but it makes it easier for them to connect with women. And finally, in most cases, women can comfortably have a gay male friend without upsetting their husbands or partners. And I think that's a big one. So, both of you said in your information for the show that you had always been friends, John, you with women, and Karen, you with gay men. So,
Mhm.
John, let's start with you. You said just growing up. I mean, you're friends. We're girls, right?
Yes. I mean, I had, guys and girls as my friends, but I knew I was gay when I was 8. And you'll hear a lot of people who are in the queer community say that I knew that I was different. I knew that I was gay. I knew, I knew specifically that I thought boys were cute and men were good looking, in a way that was different than my friends. And so I think, I mean, I don't know exactly how it happened, other than I just had my best friends as girls from elementary school through middle school and high school. And I think for all of those friendships, sort of like it's been with Karen and with you, Amanda, is the issue of vulnerability. Is, I was very insecure around guys who were into sports because I wasn't into sports. I felt the pressure to be good at them, and I wasn't good at them. It's actually why I started running in ninth grade, because I wanted to be good at something that was athletic. And so the girls in my life at a young age and the women in my life at an older age never made me feel incompetent. They didn't make me feel self-conscious about not being good at sports or not being into sports, which is a big deal.
Mhm.
Um, and I liked clothes, I liked food, I liked beautiful things, and I could talk about those with the women in my life. And sometimes when I talk with other people, they'd be like, you use that word. Like, I didn't use the word lovely until 6.5 years ago, because I used it here and there every once in a while, and people were like, that sounds so gay. And I would do something and they'd be like, that's so gay. And when you're in middle school, that really hurts, and you stop doing it. Whatever it is that people say that's so gay,
Mhm.
you stop doing it. So when I, became an adult and I was out, running and singing Broadway tunes, I didn't care, because the people I was running with were women or very progressive men.
Karen, one of the things I really connected with about your history with being friends, specifically with gay men, is that you lost a lot of friends to the AIDS crisis in the 80s.
I did. Yeah.
Share a little.
Yeah, that was so interesting. When I first moved to Columbus, Ohio, I was right out of maybe a year or two out of college. It was so interesting. I moved into this apartment complex, and all of my neighbors were gay men. It was so, I'm like, oh, well, they made the most amazing friends. They took me on like a little sister. I didn't know anybody there, right? So, um, So it was really, I met one or two neighbors, and then they started introducing me to their circles of friends of gay men. And the next thing I knew, I'm like just one of the guys, right? Just, and they were such easy, carefree relationships, just different. And I loved it. And then all of a sudden, the first guy that I met, who really had become pretty much my closest friend, called me one day and he said, I'm in the hospital. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, I've got AIDS. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to come straight there. I'm going to leave work early. I'll come straight there. I got to the hospital at 3:30. He had passed away.
Hmm.
No goodbyes, no, I mean, just the biggest shock of my life. And then 2 days later, his roommate passed away. And a couple of weeks later, these circle of friends all started getting sick. And none of them were living for more than like 2 weeks. I mean, it was crazy in the very beginning. And really, really hard and challenging to live with that shock. And there was such a stigma around AIDS, and people were like, "Oh, how can you even?" Because I went to the funerals, and they're like, "How can you do that? Aren't you afraid?" I'm like, "No, I'm not kissing these guys. I'm not sleeping with them." Um, but it was a challenging time, and I think within the first, I would say, 6 months of the AIDS crisis, that whole circle of friends were all gone. Every one of them had passed away. And so the way I dealt with it is I was one of the first to sign up as in the AIDS volunteer buddy program, where you were assigned a person who had been diagnosed with AIDS. And it was interesting because I did that for about 3 or 4 years, and these guys would live longer. Like the first few passed away pretty quickly. My last buddy probably lived about 2 years. And so that was the only, I really built a great relationship with him.
Right. And obviously, the medication continued to improve, the research continued to improve. And I covered the AIDS crisis as a young reporter.
Oh,
And so
wow.
I have really vivid memories of interviewing people and then finding out they had passed away. And I also was a buddy.
Very cool.
At the organization here in Raleigh. It's changed names a couple times. But when I first moved here, I was a buddy, and I was a buddy to two women. Both of them had partners. I think one was in prison, the other, I'm not sure, but they had been infected by their partners. And same thing, I think they both lived about 2 years. And so that continued to improve, obviously. But,
Yeah.
it is interesting. I was reading for this show, doing some research, and there was an article in Psychology Today in 2019 written by a Dr. Karen Blair. And she said women are immediately more comfortable talking to a gay man as opposed to a straight man. She wrote, quote, explicit knowledge of a man's sexual preference not only increased a woman's comfort with a gay man versus a straight man, but also affected the degree to which the women, particularly attractive ones, were willing to engage with a man on a more intimate level. And I think you guys have both touched on this, but it is a real thing. It's not a stereotype, right, John? That, women, I think, gravitate to you when they find out you're gay because they feel like, well, you're not trying to get something from me.
Right. It's a safe relationship. And I go back to the vulnerability thing. I am very fortunate to have really close friends, both of you, but other really close friends. And I think that is because I'm a vulnerable person. That has been seen as a weakness um, in many people. And I have sometimes considered it a weakness in my younger days, but realized that it was a strength. And that vulnerability that I've had, it has enabled me to become closer friends with lots of folks, but particularly as a gay man with women. because women tend to be more vulnerable. Again, that's a stereotype. Maybe women tend to become they they tend to be more comfortable in being vulnerable. And so I think that just creates stronger bonds. And so it's not only that I'm not a sexual threat or whatever, and I'm not in it to
I mean, I wouldn't
you
say
know,
that, John.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, but I think Karen's husband probably didn't have a problem with me being such a close friend to Karen before I came out, but I think Karen always knew that I was a gay man, and it was never going to become an issue. I mean, you mentioned that women sometimes become close friends and their husbands are not,
Not
are
concerned.
not
Yeah.
cons yeah, but they're not threatened by it because they know there's no sexual tension there.
Right. Karen, what do you think are the pros about not just your friendship with John, but just in general, a woman, a straight woman being friends with a gay man?
So it was interesting, sort of the history with John, because the first 14 years I knew John, he was married and raising his children. But the first thing I noticed about John, not only that he's funny and crazy, but this was in, let's see, 2004, and I had read the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, or whatever it's called. And I kept thinking when I was talking to John, like, he's the only guy I know that's straight that's not from Mars, right? Like, we met in the middle on everything. I never felt that sense that you feel like I would go talk to my boss and I'd walk away and be going, you'd be going, what the hell? Where is he from? Right? He's from Mars. I can't communicate with him. With John, it was always we were both from Venus. That was there even we were, when he was straight and raising his children. So I always had this sense, not necessarily that he was gay, but that he was different and he just was so accepting. And so um everything flowed real easy with our communications, and he was never judgmental. He just accepted everything for what you were. It, it was almost like, if you could pick your family, like we don't get to pick our families, I would have picked John to be my brother because he was just so cool and just so easy to be with. So I think, really that's the biggest advantage of having, gay male friends, even if you don't know they're gay, is that you talk on the same level, you share at the same level, and it's just a really easy relationship.
I think you just came up with the title for the podcast for this episode. We're both from Venus. Or he's not from Mars. Sharon, you're the running wife. I'm the running girlfriend. We know about each other,
Oh
so
yeah, we
it's
do.
okay. It's very transparent. I saw something on the internet the other day, and they showed men hiking, passing a woman hiker by herself, and they were acting again stereotypically. There was like, hey girl," and the idea was that women are less threatened again, especially if you're out running a trail by yourself. Um, Final thoughts from both of you guys on just how important this friendship is to you at this point in your life?
Well, I'll go. What I'll say is that you probably can't tell it on this Zoom call, but I am holding back tears um, because it was so hard to hide my authentic self. And, as Karen said before, I was so sick mentally and physically. I was having panic attacks. And it was just so tough. And all of that changed 6.5 years ago. And having you all as friends for so long and having you as such good friends and hearing you today uh, sort of go over how our relationship has evolved. Um, I can't articulate how much that means to me. And I'm so fortunate with my the privilege that I have as a white man, um, to not have some of the challenges that other people in the gay community have, and yet it was tough. And so your friendships and the friendships that I've had with other women and men throughout my coming out and just throughout my life have been so significant. So I'm very grateful, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about it.
And I'm grateful that you're willing to talk about it. So thank you.
No
Karen,
doubt.
Karen, your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, what's so interesting is John and I can go for months without talking, but I never feel like he's very far away. Like we have this anchor that keeps us in this bond, which is very unusual, that keeps us together. It's a friendship that no matter where we go, what we do, it'll always, always, always be there. I never doubt that. And when we get back together, it's like we haven't been apart. And it's just really so nice to have that kind of friendship. No strings attached, no conditions, no labels. Those are rare, very rare in life. And I mean, I value it and love John beyond measure.
I
So
think
it's
that's what
important.
you call a forever friend, right?
Oh yeah.
Always going to be there. You guys, thank you so much for sharing. Like I said, you're both my friends, so I know you and I appreciate you, but I wanted other people to hear your story. And John, especially you, thank you for being so vulnerable, because I think
No
it's
doubt.
something that other people can learn from and relate to.
Well, thank you. Really, the opportunity to talk through this is a growth opportunity for me, and it just reminds me how I made the right decision to live my authentic life. And I say to people all the time, if you hear someone say, "I'm not living my authentic life, but maybe I don't have to," you have to help them realize that they have to.
No doubt.
Great advice. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks for having us.
Thank you both.